In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to finalize your reel, which includes your caption and your cover photo. First, we're going to start with your cover photo, which you can select because that will be previewed on your grid and also on the Reels tab. And for your cover photo, you have a few options and you essentially just want to choose whatever is going to go best with your current grid aesthetic. So if you're already creating a lot of graphics, you might want to go the graphic route. And if you're creating a lot of high quality photo or video content, you might want to go more photo-centric. But for me, I'm actually going to show you how to DIY your own using Instagram stories. A tip for your cover photos is it can be really helpful to have a title in your cover photo. So when people see it on your grid or on the Reels tab, they can easily identify what the video is about so they can engage with it. As for the dimensions for your Reels cover photo, this is similar to what formerly used to be used for IGTV and the dimensions of Instagram stories. So it's going to be vertical, 9:16, but you want to make sure that you're keeping those safe zones in mind because you don't want anything to be cropped off when you add your cover photo. So you want the most important information like the subject of your cover or the title to be in the center square of your cover photo design. Now I'm going to show you exactly how I like to quickly make my own cover photo. Of course, you can select your own cover just from your reel, but I personally find you have a little bit more control over your design and it's just a little bit more cohesive if you do it the method I'm going to show you. So for the reels, I've already saved them on my camera roll. So I'm going to go to them before I added text or any of those final edits, that original copy, and I'm going to take a screenshot of what I want my cover to be. So now I'm going to open Instagram stories and I'm going to upload that screenshot that I just took. And then I'm going to go to the text option and I'm going to add the title of my reel. So now I'm going to select the text option and I'm going to add the title in for my cover photo. Whenever you're creating your cover photo or your final caption, it's really helpful to have your initial outline handy so you can reference that when writing up your title and your caption. When you're deciding on the title for your reel, you want to think of this just like being a newsletter subject line or a blog title. It should essentially say what the video is about or why they should watch it. So now that I've selected the text that I want for my title, and I've also chosen the font that I consistently am using on my stories and reels for brand consistency, now I'm going to save it and upload it into the Reels editor. So I'm going to select Add from Camera Roll at the bottom. I'm going to select the cover photo. And then now that you've had it selected, you can go over to Profile Grid to center your cover photo to make sure that the subject and that title that we created is right in the center of your grid. This is what is going to be previewed on your Instagram grid. If you feel like your cover photo isn't looking just right, what you can do is in that profile grid preview, you can move it up and down, you can pinch it to zoom it in, or you can redesign it using the safeguard and the template that is in the resources section. So now I'm going to select done. And now we're ready to write our caption. So for your Instagram Reels caption, you have a few options and you really want to stick to your unique brand voice when writing your captions for Reels. So now you can choose between a long or short caption. Both can work really well. If you feel like your brand voice matches a shorter caption, you can go that route. Personally, I love longer captions that add a lot more value to my video. As for the elements you want to include in your caption, no matter how long it is, the first line in your caption is the most important line because this is going to hook in your audience to continue to watch the video and to read more of the caption. So you really want to focus on why they should watch the video, why it's important, and why they're going to find a lot of value from watching it. This might actually be very similar to the title that you added to your cover photo and a lot of the notes that you've already added in your outline. And when picking the length, it's important to consider that shorter captions will look a little bit better on the Reels tab because of how they're transparent. When you tap it on the Reels tab, you won't see all of the text just perfectly, but on the feed you will. So shorter captions can work a little bit better. But if you know that you're sharing your reels to the feed, a longer caption can work well. Something to note when choosing how long or short you want your caption to be is how it's going to preview on the feed versus the Reels tab. So if you're on the Reels feed, you'll see that the first line is the first thing you'll see. It's the first thing you preview. But when you tap to expand it, it becomes a little bit transparent over your video. So it might be a little bit harder for people to watch that whole caption, but on the feed, it's a lot easier. So just keep that in mind when formatting your caption. And as for hashtags for Reels, hashtags used to be a big part of Instagram, but now they're just not as important as they used to be. Instagram CEO actually recently said that hashtags really don't increase or really impact the reach of your Reels. So if you want to experiment with them, I highly recommend focusing on keywords that actually represent what's in your video and only choosing a few of them versus using way too many. Or you can play around with not using hashtags at all. But if you want to use them, you can either include them in the comments or the end of your caption. For my own Reels, I have not used hashtags for a while. I noticed that whenever I didn't use hashtags, those were actually the Reels that performed the best. But I highly recommend testing it out for your own niche. I've worked with clients that maybe are location dependent or have very specific industries, and hashtags can be really helpful for them. So just experiment for your own brand. So now I'm going to reference my outline to write my entire caption. I personally prefer to have longer captions because I love to add a ton of extra value and context to whatever I shared in that reel. So first, I wrote that first line of my caption. I added emojis, I added capital letters to really bring attention to what I'm going to be sharing in the caption in the reel. I highly recommend adding a lot of line breaks, especially if you're doing a longer caption. It's going to make your caption a lot easier to read, and it's going to make it a lot more engaging. So I recommend having a line break in your caption at least every 1 to 3 lines. I also added a final line in my caption to really encourage my audience to engage with my content. So this could be to comment their favorite tool, which is what I personally did, or it could be for them to share it with a friend or to save it for later. So just to recap what I wrote in my caption, I started out with a really strong hook on what the content was going to be about. Then I kind of gave some context on what my tip is and some guidance on how they can implement it for their own business. I added that as bullet points with emojis. And then I ended things off by giving them a tip on what tool they would use and asking them to engage with a comment. If you feel like you're maybe not getting the type of engagement you want on Instagram, my best tip is to use these captions as a place, just as a friendly reminder for people to actually engage with your content, which could be to comment by asking a question or giving them a prompt, or it could be to share with someone, to tag someone in the comments, or to save your content. Sometimes people just need the reminder to actually engage. So here's a few of the final elements you might want to consider. So we have the tag people options. This is where you can tag accounts that maybe you've mentioned in your reel. So for example, I mentioned a few different tools that I'm going to tag here, or you can invite a collaborator. So let's say that you're co-creating a piece of content, or maybe you have 2 Instagram accounts you want to post your reel on. You can invite a collaborator, and once they accept your invitation, then it'll be posted to both Instagram feeds. And the final step is to add your location. This is really important if you are a location-dependent brand or business, like a brick and mortar shop, or maybe a service provider like a photographer that works in a certain area. In the next lesson, we are actually going to post and publish our reel, and I'll share some additional tips on how to schedule and draft your content.